It's Wednesday, October 29th, and Major Category 5 Hurricane Melissa made landfall near Black River, Jamaica yesterday at 1 p.m. as, no joke, the strongest landfalling hurricane in history. It ties a couple of others, and its official wind speeds at landfall were 185 mile an hour sustained winds in a low pressure center of 892 millibars. This is it as it made landfall, and a hurricane does not really look more perfect like this from infrared satellite. It's so circular. That eye is also so well defined, and it almost looks like a circular saw. And that's actually not a bad comparison for what I did. Here's what it looked like from visible satellite. Once again, we can just see how much convection was going up around the center. It was pretty much still strengthening all the way up until landfall. And right up until landfall, we got those measurements from some of our Hurricane Hunter planes. Here is the official 892 millibar measurement made by one of the NOAA aircraft that flew right through the center. And the storm was so strong that this NOAA aircraft only made one pass before it went back to Lakeland, Florida. Here it is making that pass, and we can see that it curves back and goes up to base. In fact, a Air Force Reserve Hurricane Hunter aircraft actually measured a similar measurement at 892 millibars at that exact center of the storm, and this one actually may have received some damage from some extreme turbulence going on in Melissa. This one also turned back, and it may have actually been a little bit stronger than 185 mile an hour sustained winds, and also may have had a slightly lower central pressure. Here is some of the readings from a probe on the ground, and we can see that sustained winds may have peaked at roughly 180 knots. That is over 200 miles an hour sustained. This is from a probe on the surface. Of course, this is not the actual reading or the actual specific wind speed given by the National Hurricane Center, but it is true that a probe may have measured higher than 185 mile an hour winds at the surface, and possibly a lower central pressure as well. So where does this put it in the record books? Well, we already know that it is the strongest landfalling hurricane in history, tying with Hurricane Dorian and the Labor Day hurricane, and it is also officially tied for the third strongest Atlantic hurricane in history and the strongest and most intense hurricane at this late in the season, actually. So multiple records have been broken there, of course, with that 892 millibar central pressure and those 185 mile an hour sustained winds at landfall. Also, it breaks a record for the driest eye in history from a hurricane. So that's another something there. So really, this is a record-breaking storm, pretty much the strongest in a lot of the facets. And we really haven't seen a storm like this make landfall since about 90 years ago with the Labor Day hurricane, at least for low central pressure wise, which occurred in 1935. Now, the last hurricane to make landfall at 185 mile an hour sustained winds was actually not too long ago. That was Hurricane Dorian in 2019 in parts of the Bahamas. But also that is going to be tied with, once again, the Labor Day hurricane. So all in all, just a record-breaking storm, really a truly insane thing that happened. And as for the actual impacts, it was pretty much everything that we expected, going anywhere eastward of the landfall point, which was slightly around Black River, all the way up to Portland Point. That's that little peninsula sticking out right here. We could have seen anywhere between 10 to 15 feet in surge. I think closer to the eye wall near parts of Treasure Beach, I think there was even the chance for close to 20 feet of surge. Now, in parts like Kingston, which are further east of Portland Point in this little peninsula, I definitely think there was still surge. It just was not that major surge in between 10 to 15 feet. Would not be surprised if we saw around 5 feet of surge in that region. All of the rainfall chances that we predicted, anywhere between 30 to 40 inches in some isolated areas, even receiving up to 60 inches, looks to have unfortunately come true. That has already caused major flooding across the country and also tons of landslides. And then the last thing, of course, the winds. This completely shattered all of the expectations we had. yesterday we thought really the most it was going to make a landfall at before the morning hours, and it actually did make landfall, was 175 mile an hour sustained. And that was kind of a long shot, but to make landfall at a pressure lower than it was already at in the low 890s, and then also having wind speeds of 185 just completely defied our expectations once again. And also, the storm did something a little alarming right before landfall. As these really powerful hurricanes do, they start to wobble a lot, and it actually tracked a little bit more westward and even temporarily stalled, which meant areas within the eye wall experienced those maximum winds for longer, more rain, and then also because it went westward, it even impacted some areas which weren't expecting to see the worst of the storm, like even Montego Bay. That is a major tourist destination. Lots of damage coming out of there as well. So after interacting with Jamaica, now Melissa is actually not the strongest hurricane in the world right now. It is just a 125 mile an hour sustained wind storm, and the central pressure has gone all the way up to 950. Now, it is pretty much confirmed that this is going to make landfall in southeastern Cuba as a major hurricane. Will it go up to Category 5 strength? Not looking super likely, but that's not out of the picture. Currently, it's still moving somewhat slowly. It did move at about this pace all the way through Jamaica, which just prolonged those super terrible impacts and made them even worse. But because it's going to be moving slowly through this little region between Jamaica and Cuba, there is a window for re-intensification that definitely could happen. And this is the current look of Melissa on infrared satellite. And crazy enough, it looks like the eye, which collapsed over mainland Jamaica right about here, actually appears to be opening up. It's getting drier and drier in the eye, scan after scan. That's an indication that the eye is going to open back up, and we are going to see some more intensification before it makes that subsequent landfall in southeastern Cuba. So what can be expected for that landfall in southeastern Cuba? A really wide range of winds. I think anywhere between 130 to all the way up to 150 miles an hour sustained is feasible. I also think we could see some gust, potentially upwards of 175 miles an hour with that. Some surge anywhere eastward of the landfall point, probably for at least 50 nautical miles, could potentially see all the way up to 12 feet of storm surge. And it looks like, once again, rainfall is going to be an issue with this, as anywhere near that point and slightly even eastward of that point of landfall could see anywhere between 30 to 20 inches of rain, also bringing that major flooding risk and also a mudslide risk, as this is a somewhat mountainous region of Cuba as well. Now, this is what our hurricane model is predicting for that landfall in Cuba. We do see some slight re-intensification going on, and it actually has it going into the big Caribbean island at roughly 935 millibars of central pressure. The HAFSA, which is what this is, I think has been closest to what has actually happened with Melissa so far. So I wouldn't be surprised to see something in the realm of this as all. Now, as it passes Cuba, it looks like it is going to make a third landfall potentially in parts of the Bahamas as a Category 3 hurricane, bringing all of those threats, those major rainfall totals, also surge, and then of course those winds. Now, luckily by this point, Melissa is going to be moving a whole lot faster. It's really going to be getting slingshotted off into the north and east into the Atlantic. So luckily those impacts won't be as prolonged, but I predict that they will still be pretty severe. And we actually do have a very small risk for some severe weather in the U.S. today. That's going to be on the mid-Atlantic coast and parts of northeastern North Carolina and southeastern Virginia. This is exclusively going to be for a damaging wind threat, thinking we could see some gusts maybe in that 65 mile an hour range. And then this is what it could look like on radar as it kind of unfolds. We're going to notice a really strong area of convergence in front of a front going on right here, and then that low pressure center ejecting off to the north and east as well. This is going to bring some pretty favorable shear for these storms. Definitely think there is going to be that chance for a couple of severe warned storms out here, bringing that threat for some damaging winds. I think that's going to be pretty much it, though, because for hail, it looks like it's just going to be too linear and too messy to actually see anything. Then for that tornado threat, kind of the same thing, too linear, too messy. Not even super sure we'll see a spin up tornado threat with this. I wouldn't rule it out completely, though, but I think the main threat by far is just going to be some isolated damaging winds, even if that